All the children in the classroom, and at the end of the show, when they did stuff, that teacher would go, "Magic mirror, who do you see?" And she would name all them kids, Scott, Bobby, Tina, but never said Shea. And I was like, oh man, not that hard to say Shea. This was in the 70s. So I was just like, come on. Now I realize the name is not that, wasn't that common. But what had me cracking up about it was I said, okay, magic mirror, who do I see at this point? I don't like to call myself out on stuff, but I love measuring time and passage of time, and the reality hit me that, wow, I'm a half century old. What have I seen? What have I learned? Beyond just you're getting older or whatever. What have I seen? What have I learned? The one on the end is more contemporary, more recent. I have my old cassettes from high school, which I was like, wow, I still have these. Let me find the first purpose of them. And then some of the other objects in there, if you look inside, on the top right, you see my sister Natasha posing in front of her Prince mirror posters in '83. Oh yeah, that's why that's the purple shirt. And then on the end, you'll notice the giant Confederate flag. As a matter of fact, when I was invited to have a show here, one of the first things I thought of when they said you can bring stuff that you find that's significant to your work, I was like, I won't bring the Confederate flag. I won't bring that. Because when a lot of times when I went to Virginia, me and my older brother Sean would sometimes hang out at Barnes & Nobles. And we'd go flipping through books, magazines, like I said. I love libraries, I love books, things like that. And I was surprised at how many books in Harrisonburg, Virginia, in this Barnes & Nobles, gave an alternative view of the Civil War. And I was like, you know, and it's hard not to get upset being a northerner too. You say, oh, well, technically the South. I'm like, this mother, and then you go, this ain't my town. This ain't my town. And so part of mine was a response to that, saying, okay, when people say, oh, it's about Southern heritage, it has nothing to do with race. I'm like, we're swamped in it. It has everything to do with it. And I'm like, you can't say that the vice president of the Confederacy was a liar when he said, yes, it has everything to do with race. You can't say he's a liar. Up here, underneath history is no mystery. That's Black woman, this is not your last supper. I was so upset about the Hurricane Katrina and the death and the destruction and the people being herded into that football stadium or whatever, and to see an elderly Black woman wrapped in the American flag had to be like in her 80s. That it was like, this is America, this is horrible. And then I started saying, look at all these elements, but at the end of the day, my mother, my sister, my aunts, uncles, cousins, what have you, friends, Black women have been the glue. In spite of all these things, which is why I said this is not your last supper. Because it's glue. So some of the other pieces, I do enjoy doing watercolor portrait painting. I enjoy, I was really saddened when I did the one in Eggleston Square because they put up these memorials and spots for people to kill in different parts of Roxbury and Dorchester. And I used to go to Eggleston Square. I don't live that far from there in Jamaica Plain, but I go to Eggleston Square a lot for pizza and beer. All the LS kids, y'all didn't hear that. All the LS kids, y'all didn't hear that. We're going to take that off. So, a lot of stuff deals with like the legacy of King Leopold and the scramble for Africa, the exploitation for minerals and things in Africa that caused the poverty and caused all the death and destruction. I always am concerned about what happens in Boston Public Schools because I'm a product of Boston Public Schools. I went to English High. And so a number of pieces address a lot of these historical things that I find significant or something I find important to share with people. For instance, the issue, the execution of George Stinney. It took them 70 years to pardon him for a murder he did not commit, but they executed him. He was 14, he was so little. They had to put stuff underneath him so he could fit inside the electric chair. And it's disgusting and it's painful, that history. But for me, I don't feel like, because it's disgusting and painful, I shouldn't talk about it. Or that, oh, it's the past, let it go. Yeah, the past is prologue. You look at the fight over voting rights, the fight over reproductive rights, and all the things going on now, the past is prologue to a lot of things that are going on right now. So, you know what I'm saying, meeting y'all. So these are the things that I find very compelling and interesting. The crucifixion up there, someone asked me over here in the thing about why that's there and the genitalia on it. And it was funny because that opening reception, first Friday, there was this older woman who came by and was going to take a picture, and she went like this. It's just genitals. Like that. I'm like, oh, she's embarrassed. I think no one's looking at her. But, I chose to do the crucifixion piece because of the incessant rampant racism that continually haunts black men in this country. I chose that particular doll because it's played by LeVar Burton. He played Geordie LaForge on Star Trek Next Generation, which is a futuristic show, but he also played Kunta Kinte in Roots. So I was like, have things gotten better? It's almost like a symbol of, well, has it gotten better, or are we still incessantly getting through what we're getting through? I chose the rock and sock and robots for it that are around it, and I made them different colors, partly because if you ever played rock and sock and robots, and again, this is for those of us 45 and up, they got your hands on it like this. What's making black people have to fight white people? What's making white people do this? What's making, and I'm talking regular people, where's all this fighting coming from? The corporations, the politicians, and all the other bullshit. So it's like a lot of us are getting played. You know, and I don't want to proselytize here because I'm just talking about my work, but, you know, all right, I'll say it, Donald Trump, but you know what I'm saying? So these are the things that I worked on. And on the other side, I had a good friend, Cedric Vice Douglas, who gave me a whole bunch of these strips he had made. Caution, I can't breathe, police line, do not cross. And I started incorporating those in my work. So those are the things that you see on the other side of the wall. Because it is like a shop. I'm glad they face the windows that when people walk by, they can see it from the street. Because it is like a shop. Okay. I am now open for any and all questions.
Everybody speechless?
No, I just when you were young, did you think you were going to be an artist? Did you think you were going to be an artist when you were younger?
I didn't think it, I knew it. And part of the reason I knew it was because I was doing it all the time.
I know.
And when I was a kid, we had a neighbor named Wendell Sullivan. I always talk about him when I do these kinds of talks. When we were on the school bus, he could draw superheroes. He was a couple years older than me, like maybe 3 years like my sister. And he could draw superheroes from comic books without looking. And he looked just like the characters. And he would draw them. And he was so good, and he was so amazing. We kids used to give him around like it was currency. Oh, I got to draw a Spider-Man if you want to trade me for whatever. One day I tried to do it, and I realized mine was better. And I didn't say nothing. I throw his face in it or nothing. But I was like, man, watch this. And I started doing it. I've always known that I have kind of an eidetic memory about stuff. The only other person I really know that has been like that with me is my brother Sean.
Yeah.
In terms of memorization of certain places, themes, and things like that. And like with Sean, we could both talk about certain things when we were kids. That's why that was so significant. Someone asked me earlier about the naked woman on there, and I was like, yeah, well, my dad did take us to see a Pam Grier movie when I was 5. What are you gonna do? I remember, you know. Or some of the other visuals that are in there that I was like, oh, I can remember this thing or those events and stuff. And me and my brother could play it back and forth with each other all the time. Like, yeah, remember Grove Hall when the something happened, or when we were in Virginia, and there was the, and you would know this, the wood chipper in the front yard, none of us black kids were supposed to talk. But when y'all weren't around, one of us was going to crank it anyway. So that's up there. Yeah, like the wood chipper's up there. Somebody going to crank it. So that's why. And again, I did box form because they're treasure memories. So that's why a lot of it's box forms. And like I said, most people who are like 45 and up are going to be like, yeah, I remember. That's what it is.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
So you've been doing your political art on a regular basis, if not daily, close to daily, for a long span of years. And it seems to me, but I may have a warped way of perceiving it, that there's been an accelerating pace of things to keep track of. You know, of things that have gone on politically and types of things that are happening and all kinds of stuff. Have you felt that? Have you felt that the pace of things that you want to capture in your art has been increasing?
I'm trying, well, first of all, for those who don't know, that's Lee Weinstein. He helped me with this video. And I would like everyone to give him a round of applause. And that was my graduate thesis video. It wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't his son. I think that I'm bordering on potentially being a hoarder with the amount of newspapers, magazines, and periodicals, and I'm very systematic in what I read. So a lot of times I have to read it, or it's going to hit the ceiling and stuff, because there's so much research, particularly post Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan. But I'm still reading certain books by Bob Woodward and by this person and that person, trying to piece it all together so it makes sense for me. So hopefully it'll make sense for an audience or for someone else who sees it. But yeah, I see a sense of urgency about certain things, particularly the January 6th thing.
Yeah, like the whole thing again, it seems like you got a lifetime of stuff to do in art just from that one day.
Well, what I said when I was at Spoke Gallery and someone asked when I would be done, I replied, yeah, when the paper runs out. That's when I'll be done, when the paper runs out.
And the paper ain't gonna run out, you know that, right?
Trying not to cry when I say that, but yeah, it ain't gonna run out. So, my thoughts right now also, I want to acknowledge my hopes and prayers for my cousin, Mark, who's an aunt.
Yeah.
And even though folks don't know him, he's in my thoughts too. All right, love him to death and everything. And I just want to put that out there that I'm hoping that he is a full recovery. Are there any questions? Oh, there's another question.
Those of us who follow your work have seen you go between watercolor to multimedia to collage. And I'm wondering, when you think of a subject that you need to record, do you let the subject inform the media that you're using, or do you think, I want to do something in watercolor, and then you choose a subject?
Sometimes it's both. But there's also moments like in the classroom when I teach, I usually have a sketchbook with me and I'll start taking notes and start drawing some things in there. And then if I give a demo for some kids and I'm like, okay, here's a way of doing watercolor, here's a way of doing something. What ends up happening is I will stop at the end of the day, so this looks kind of pretty good on me. So sometimes it's inspiring, but I also have a preference for, if you come to an exhibit, the overall theme about race, politics, and history and stuff may come into play, but I don't want it to be 20 oil paintings or 20 watercolor paintings that everyone just says, oh, he does a lot of watercolor paintings. I want to have an experience where you can see the different things that come out. So maybe it'll be more engaging when you read this, or it's more engaging when you study that, things like that. So I like the diversity of media and subjects that I do. Yes?
Shea, how do you navigate an art world that is predominantly run by white people when the message and the art that you're making is critical of inequities in our culture? And how do you navigate it? How do you balance that?
I hadn't really thought about it. I just know in my heart of hearts I'm not going to change. Like, I'm very glad for this opportunity, Spoke Gallery opportunity, 13th Street Gallery opportunity, and everything, but I'm not going to change what I do. Because if I start tailor-making it towards an audience, I'm being untrue to myself. So on that note, it doesn't bother me either way. I'm not going to change what I do. Because once you say, oh wow, now he's painting lilies and daisies, what the hell?
I'm gonna go with Shay. What's going on? I'm the first one to call you to tell you, Shay, what's Lily and Daisy?
What's up?
Why?
Sit on Baroni, this don't work.
What's up? Yeah. But Shay, I do want to say I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
And I love you. I want you to know that.
I love you too.
Now, let me turn around and stop you and go on my head and say bye.
I said you want to take some of the painting home. You have a question?
Yeah, do you have tactics to protect yourself, like emotionally, when you're constantly doing research about topics that feel really frustrating and heavy?
That's a great question.
Talk about it at home.
To protect myself?
Yeah,
Self-care?
emotionally, mental health wise.
watching reruns of TV programs.
Yeah, that was what I was gonna ask. Like, are there like light things like books, TV shows that
Yeah.
are just to get your brain?
Some of that, I go to Comic-Cons, and
Yeah.
I meet people at Comic-Cons and see actors and actresses from TV shows.
I love
when I was
that.
a kid.
Yeah.
Also, when I do this kind of stuff, there's a part of me that's always in the back of my mind going, yeah, it might be overwhelming sometimes, it might be painful, but George Stinney was executed. These people were murdered. There were people who were destroyed on the Middle Passage coming to this continent. Somehow I want to have a voice to support it.
Yeah.
Clap. Those lives and those existences and those realities, I mean, most people forget slavery was 200-something years, and that's not even counting the Jim Crow that came afterwards. That's a lot of lives and a lot of human beings. And part of how this all comes together also is, like I said, I always am a big fan of Andy Warhol and pop art, and everyone gets 15 minutes of fame. None of this would have been possible if it wasn't for Thomas and Ellen Mason. None of this would have gotten me on that trajectory if I wasn't raised on a Mason side. And so, on that note, that's how everything has just blossomed and grown into what it is now. And it's always important. I'm like, it's always important for me to bring that up. Because when you start and where you end up, how does it begin? Where does it go? Yes.
Just to bounce off my daughter's question, I kind of feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, in your work, not just the writings in here, but even something contained like inside the scroll books, for instance, you have that same kind of back and forth in terms of, I think, kind of like kind of protecting the viewer a little bit, giving them a respite, because you've got serious portraits of some reprehensible people, some people that you can elevate, and then all of a sudden you have like a portrait of like the Banana Splits.
That's for my sake.
That's for your own sake.
I could go so incessantly over this, and if I just focused on, like, say, the last 4 years of Trump and just did nothing, I might just go insane and want to kill somebody. Because I'll make you mad.
Gotta throw a banana split.
So, I've actually transported the scrolls, thanks to my best friend, Joseph Jones. We've actually transported the scrolls to a lot of these Comic-Cons to get people to sign it, and get celebrities to sign it, or get politicians to sign it. The only person who's ever refused to sign it was former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. She was like, I'm only signing my autobiography, and I'm at JFK Library. And I'm like, I got the autobiography too. You can sign what you can. She was like, her guards were like, So I started sounding like a crazy person in the parking lot. When I was reading, I was like, Madeleine Albright ain't nothing anyway. Carried in the car like people that in the parking lot, like, what is this deal? So, but otherwise, I've been lucky enough to transport it and meet some of the most eclectic collections of people, science fiction, TV stars, movie stars, and all this other stuff. And they go, oh my God, wow. I'm like, yeah, sign it right there, everything. So it helps.
I got a follow-up question, kind of similar to it just revolves around everything you've been talking about, because you consume so much media, and you're such an avid reader, and you immerse yourself in this like in such a big way. The amount of information, textual and visual, that you have to comb through, I can't personally wrap my head around like the curative aspect of it. How do you curate through that stuff to come up with the images that you have? Because there's a lot.
Constantly reading and writing. I constantly read and write. Most people know it at my school, if I'm not in my classroom, generally I'm in the library. So I'm constantly reading and writing and taking notes. And some of the stuff I don't know if it makes sense. Like I said, I was talking about Bob Woodward earlier. If it makes sense to people to know about how I feel about this journalist and the directions this journalist went in when he refused to released the statement that Donald Trump had. He had knowingly knew what COVID was going to do, but he still went out in public and told everyone, oh, it's cool, all you need is some aerosol spray cans or whatever, you're okay. Bob Woodward knew, but held off from publishing that information until his book came out. And I remember getting mad about it because I kind of respected him as a journalist because of the Watergate. And so when he did that, I ended up getting the sketchbook and I'm just writing down, yeah, Bob, you know, Bob Woodward, you fucked up. And I'm just mad, just bending and drawing and stuff like that. But there's a lot of pages of that kind of stuff I have at home just when I'm like, take notes on it, read this, read that, and figure stuff out.
Then how for you to something like that through all that material that you create yourself, what kind of like makes the final cut to say, end up as a finished piece on the wall?
I don't know. I have no idea what makes the final cut. I mean, what's significant, like the Roger Taney thing or the Thurgood Marshall thing and stuff like that. What's significant to me as a black man, as a parent, as a school teacher, if I had an opportunity, what would it be? I mean, I'm lucky because even though I teach art at the high school, I have a colleague named Chris Herbert who often asks me to go into his race class and give a slide presentation of my work. So it's not quite, you know, someone could get mad and say, oh, it's critical race theory or whatever. It's not. But it is talking about facts and history. And that's not even to denounce critical race theory because all that is talking about facts and history. So I'm always blessed every year. Chris always asks me to come in and give a talk or a video, a slideshow presentation of my work and discuss it with the students. And let's face it, young people aren't eager to learn. You keep passing laws and doing everything you can, try to keep everybody stupid, but young people won't learn. They just do. They want to have that motivation. That's been my experience at MS. Yes, ma'am.
That's what I was going to ask. What has been the response of young people to your work?
You may have to ask a couple of them. There's Patty Newman here, and there's a few up in the audience, but I generally, in the classroom, it's in Chris Herbert's class, it's generally positive, but I try not to proselytize when I teach, because I'm there for drawing and painting.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like I can say, okay, we're going to start a watercolor thing. Did y'all know global warming might kill us all? We got to do something. It don't sound right. It don't sound right. Last thing you want is a bunch of parents coming at you saying, what the hell is the teacher doing that for me? My kid's in there just to paint. What's up?
Yeah.
But we're lucky that there's an AP art class that Sarah Fon Wilson teaches that kids can go in that direction and explore some things that are more on the political side and what they do. That's a class that basically gets these kids ready to go to college for art. And so when Sarah teaches it, I try to support her in the drawing and painting 2 class I teach by giving kids latitude in terms of the decisions they want to create. But it's a very kind of scary slope to not say, I want to use this moment to start telling them. Because let's face it, I mean, out there in that neighborhood, there may be a couple of Trump lovers in the classroom.
Yeah.
Last thing you're going to need is for me to say something, and before you know it, I'm looking at a job.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay.
Say out with me.
I got to do this. If Ellen DeGeneres can do it at the Oscars, I got to do this. Now, when I say 15 minutes of fame, if you look at the collage up there, to the immediate right of my grandfather sitting at the breakfast table, sitting at that bench table up there, to the immediate right, I'm sorry, the actual picture. So you see that picture right there. Yep, you can point to it again. That's my mother, who without her, none of this would even be possible. That's her sitting in the front row right here. And none of my students better ask her no questions. So, on that point, are there any other questions? I'd be glad to answer them, or I'm obviously staying before, so I can, if someone comes up and you say, oh, I just thought of something, you're more than welcome to, I have a question.
I have a question. Being that you're the first Black artist to have a space here in Boston, I'm sure it's been like, probably gotten a lot of despite seeing those people even push back behavior, being an artist, and being art.
So that's been horrible with that.
Yeah, what keeps you going and doing this kind of radical art, despite some of these spaces when shut us out are not going to stop us.
Do I think that I'm going to have more opportunities? Is that what you
No. I'm saying what keeps you going despite maybe there being like pushback or being in a space such as Boston. You're the only Black artist, right, in Boston. Yeah, for this
but there is
exhibit now.
someone across the street who has a studio.
Right, a studio here, and they're the only ones. But I'm saying, like, what do you have, like, any, do you have any advice for, like, aspiring Black artists who are also trying to, like, keep going in this radical space, despite sometimes the doors feel like they're closed to us?
Live for your truth.
Yes.
We got too many, at least for me, how I look at it is, there are too many of us murdered, dead, victims of sexual assaults who will never be discovered.
Right.
Black and brown trans people are killed at record numbers in this country. Native American women are the most sexually assaulted people in this country. I mean, the list goes on and on. So for me, if I'm like, if you want to do something radical, I appreciate you saying radical arts. I'm like, really? Most people who know me be like, that's just shady as shit. So I don't see it as radical. Let's not change it because too many of us have died that those stories need to exist. And when it comes to those stories, and I go back to what I've shown there, I could not have possibly gotten to this point if it wasn't for Thomas and Elmer Mason. And my mother, my father.
Yes.
And my cousins and aunts, everyone who's given me the feedback and support and encouragement and stuff like that. This wouldn't have even been possible to me to start playing this operation. So speak that truth, because too many of us, there's all these reasons in society to silence us, or ignore us, or say, oh, you're just angry, you're militant, you're troublemaking, black person, you just eat stuff. No, all those different excuses, it should not silence our truth. We have too much blood in our country, on us. You know, I hope that answers your question. Okay. Are there any other questions? Uh-oh, got another one. Okay.
So I've noticed that a lot of your work is kind of based on the past or the recent present. Have you ever thought about what maybe the future would hold, or what your art could be if it were for the future?
What the future would hold? Someone asked George Orwell that question one time. He's one of my favorite writers of all time. And he said, the future holds a big boot standing on our necks. And it was very cynical, but he was honest. This is 30, 40, 50 years ago when he said a big boot standing on our necks. If you've ever read Animal Farm, 1984 and stuff, it's scary on our cell phones how we can easily be tracked. It's scary that just by one lie saying the votes were stolen, because basically too many black people came out and voted and swung that choice by how many people in America actually go along with, yeah, the votes were stolen. And let's raise all kind of hell. And I would have been right even when I'm not right. So there's so much of that. So much of that kind of stuff. And I don't know. It's a challenge. So when I'm doing a lot of the things that I do, I got to process it mentally. I got to think about things mentally, but also process the values of what I'm saying and what I'm imparting. If it wasn't for my family, I don't know what my values, how different my values would be. And that's why this all became what it became. Yes, sir.
Brother Shea, you know, as you know, I'm a poet.
One of the best in Boston.
And when I was beginning to, a lot of my poetry is similar to your work in visionary kind of things. And people would, I remember, why you got it? You know, they just wanted me to, like, I feel pretty and witty and wild. That's not how we feel. That's not what we see every day, you know, in America. And I'm just so honored that you have kept the tradition, expanded it so forth. And it's not only brilliant collage art, but it's it's one of them. And I used to wonder, you know, when I was young, I said, I wonder what the artists coming after us, will they continue? And thank you, brother. Thank you, brother.
I like the tradition, I like the continuation of it, and there's been too many of us who, you know, the situation has been, a lot of our lives have been lost, taken, destroyed, manipulated. The list can go on and on and on. I want to visually somehow represent it and expose it and show it for what it is. But I think it's important. And again, someone had asked a question earlier about would I change it? Nah. We've got no reason to, got no desire to keep it going. And I would hope at some point when the scroll in its entirety gets displayed, I'm hoping the Smithsonian or someplace like that, and it's going to be the first time I work hard. It's going to be the work, for me, this is my ultimate goal. Number one, I know it's pretty much probably an impossible dream, but to lay that thing out is probably a couple of miles away.
Yeah.
What I want it to be is the reality of my life, 20-something years of my observations. Can you walk a mile in a black man's shoes? Or in a black man's views? Over this passage of time, you know, what he's seeing, the craziness, the hypocrisy, the insanity about how dysfunctional our government can be towards us as people of color. Are you willing to do that? How many people actually would? And be like, okay, I'll start from the beginning and just work my way. I mean, obviously people will get tired. Well, hell, get on a scooter. Are you willing to do it? And that's a challenge because oftentimes our lives are reduced to sound bites. Quick little comments, quick little, you know, oh, he's angry. Okay, oh, he's out sharping. Oh, he's moving sorry. Oh, she's this way, she's that. And then it's like, bam, we gotta move on to commercials. That's the challenge. And so that's the thing ultimately I want to have.
So are we gonna watch?
When I'm done with the talk.
No, are you going to?
Put it back on?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Are there any other questions?
Did my sister
Dr. Earl.
What?
Did
my sister ride you out there, so.
Used to crack Jack.
Yeah. She did not, Jane did. But I had to get him when I was a kid.
Yeah.
My birthday was August 28th, and it was time for school, so I had to get a pencil no matter what. Because you're going to school with those later on. It's like, yeah, got a lot of these. A lot of pencils, markers, stuff like that. But I was lucky because I got a lot of support and encouragement in school, and people were like, "Oh, you're on your way, keep doing it." And once you get that encouragement, you want to keep going, and things like that. So I'm proud of that.
Yes. I want to tell you you're amazing, Shea. Just continue on. And keep being this. I love you.
Love you too.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Brother Barrington.
Jay, thank you so much for all your work. This is amazing and great to see you all the family out. I've been hearing about y'all for 20 plus years. I'm feeling Virginia. I'm feeling like Virginia. I have a question about, because your work is so prodigious and you go from media to media, and I understand what how that often comes from being a teacher, right? And having to teach for the generalists. Can you talk about either an art movement or a contemporary art practice that you feel really close to right now that resonates with your work?
Pop art. I've always been a big fan of pop art. When I was a kid, I remember seeing Andy Warhol on Minnesota Love Boat, and he was at WrestleMania 4. And I was like, I want to be that kind of artist. And just to do cool stuff, like go to WrestleMania or be on TV and stuff. And so I appreciated his work, Robert Rauschenberg's work, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and the influx of how graffiti and everything came together with hip-hop towards that era of pop art. So if you look at the things down there, it's clear it's so much pop art. I mean, for God's sake, I got Pez dispensers on. and try to find some form of connection to certain things from childhood and memories and experiences like Robert Rauschenberg. So I like to think I'm still a pop artist, artist as a social commentary person, artist as an activist, all those different kinds of descriptions. I just want to have fun and be constructive with whatever I do, and have some sort of meaning or some sort of purpose. Brother Barrett and me went to high school. Yeah. There's so many people here who I can just start pointing out. Yeah, but big sister Tasha. Are there any other questions? Okay, we have scrolls in the back of the room for sale, as well as some posters if people want to pick those up and things like that. If there are no other questions, then I really appreciate this. Thank you very much for the audience. And I'm staying until whenever closing time is.